You know what? Leadership at its core is about what you are willing to carry, not just the title, not just the responsibility, but the actual weight of people's hopes, needs, and lived realities. Because real leadership is not passive, it's not performative, and it's deeply connected to purpose and passion. You've heard all of our guests explain that. It's the kind of passion that keeps you showing up when the work is hard, when progress feels slow, and when the problems are bigger than any one person can solve. And in this season, we need leaders who are not just talking about change, but they're actually committed to doing the work that creates it. Leaders who are understanding that the impact requires consistency and that advocacy requires courage and that transformation that requires staying connected to why you started in the first place. So today's conversation is not just about policy, it's about what fuels leadership, what sustains it, and what it looks like when passion meets purpose in action. Because when leadership is actually rooted in passion, it doesn't just speak, it moves. And so when we're talking this evening about leadership, we are talking from an authentic place that's connected to an impact of movement. So stay tuned, stay connected, and we'll be right back. What's making strong leaders in this season? Leadership is influence. It's rooted in the responsibility you take. You pay attention to the patterns, your calm, your strength, your hope. It's all integrated. We are living in a time where trust is fragile and people are watching not just what leaders say, but how they decide. Integrity is not optional anymore. Obedience is going to cost you. In this season, we're not just flipping adversity, we're forming leaders who can carry what comes next. Leaders from across all dimensions of fields and spaces, they're going to come together to give you the best of their wisdom. And I want you to leave each episode with a call to action. That's the work, that's the calling, and that's the conversation we're stepping into together. Hello, welcome to the flip side of adversity. I am Dr. Virdra Jackson, the CEO and creative behind Living Strong Consulting, and I'm so excited about this conversation to be able to have this leader in the chair and open to really talking about the passionate, powerful work that she does consistently. So tonight we have State Representative Morgan Cephas, who is the chair of the Philadelphia delegation, and from advancing maternal health equity through landmark legislation to tackling affordability and expanding workforce opportunities, Representative Cephas is working every day to improve the lives of families, not only in her district, but across Pennsylvania. So I am so excited to welcome to the flip side of adversity, State Representative Morgan Cephas. Welcome to the conversation.
Hi, doctor. Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me.
I am well. I am well. And again, so grateful that you have taken the time out of your busy schedule for us to have a leadership conversation. There are
Mhm.
so many things that you are creating deep impact in. And before we jump into the details about those impactful elements, I think I would just like to kind of start from the beginning.
Mhm.
And can you tell us a little bit about what helped you recognize that this level of leadership as a public servant, how did you know that this was the work that you were actually meant to do?
So I will be honest that I did not start my career off knowing. And I think it is critical, particularly in this moment, that you are honing in on not just identifying leaders in our community and in our city across our Commonwealth, but having a conversation about what leadership is in a very difficult climate. And it's not just a difficult climate in politics or electoral politics, it's a difficult climate in every single space that we all occupy. And it really is a question of how do you lead in these difficult moments that we're experiencing and what type of leader you are. So I will say I wasn't born into leadership or into public service, but what really drove me was I was in college at the time, and I took a campaigning class, and I just loved the idea just within campaigning and understand how policy and politics impacts the everyday life of everyday citizens and how you can be transformative in the space is really what brought me into elected office. So I grew up in Philadelphia all my life. I am a true blue Philly girl out of West Philadelphia, and I reflect when I talk about leadership and I talk about this space. I reflect on how I grew up. So when you think of Philadelphia growing up in an urban community, every single policy issue that we are constantly talking about has been my lived experience. I mean, I was the young person that had to travel an hour outside of my community in order to access a quality education because I did not have a central high school or a girls high or a masterman in my backyard or in my zip code. But I was also that young person that literally took mass transit, which is why I fight so hard for it, not just to get to school, but also to get my first job where I actually made $5.15, which is why fighting for minimum wage is a serious issue. But yeah, working at the Philadelphia Zoo, I took mass transit and public transportation. When I went to go get my first job out of college, I took mass transit. But I also grew up with two amazing parents that, were working, a part of working families. And, they reinforced in me, taught me at a very early age that if you want the democracy, if you want the community, if you want the access that we all deserve, you're going to have to fight for it. And it, just constantly makes me think of, my mother who, raised four girls and, was married to my father. She first started her career out on a picket line in 1986. She was
Uh,
a DC 47 union worker. And, when she was on that picket line, she was fighting for the same issues that we're literally fighting for today. And that's, better wages, healthcare benefits, and a retirement plan that would not force her to go back to work during retirement. And, at that time, I was on the picket line with her, getting my advocacy card early. But I was 2 years old and I wasn't there to just hold a picket sign. I was there because she couldn't afford childcare.
mm,
And, that is the reality, the economic reality of just so many families, not just my own, but those that, I serve. And, when I say I am a true blue Philadelphian, I mean, I experienced gun violence at a very early age. I literally was in the third grade walking to elementary school and, graduated with student loan debt. So a lot of the challenges that I face, I see, my peers face. I see, so many families that I represent. And I truly believe in this moment of leadership, stepping into, the space of being an elected official really just reinforces where I've come from and what I want to ensure that the next generation doesn't have to deal with as they navigate murky waters. So that's really what brought me into this space. As you can imagine, it is very difficult, but it is work that I've been committed to over the past 10 years of my career, and work that I enjoy, particularly because I get to transform the city that helped transform me and invest in me.
yes.
So
Ah, and in that answer, you literally wove the response that I think people who erroneously believe or sit with the statement that, oh, I don't want to be involved in politics,
Mm,
or I don't want to be a part of politics. Well, it's connected to literally
everything.
everything.
Yeah. Yes, from your gas tank to your purchasing food at the grocery store, it is all interconnected. So I
Y-
try to, when people make those comments, I try to say, well, politics is very much involved in your life. So,
yes, whether you want to be involved in
mhm,
it or not. And
yeah,
I would even lean in and say it is driving portions of your life.
yeah,
So such a powerful truth. And so
mhm,
with that, there may be people who are listening who don't have a full perspective or view of what you actually do. So I
yeah,
shared a little bit, just literally a snippet, because your bio and the things you've impacted would take half of the show if I read it
mhm,
all. I only gave them a little small snippet. So for people who are listening who may not actually follow everything that's happening in
yeah,
Harrisburg, um,
yeah.
what does your role actually mean day to day?
Right, right, right. That's a great question. I feel like we need to find a way to implement civics more often,
Mm-hmm.
and in
Mm-hmm.
every conversation, and make sure we're having the discussion in different mediums. So it's a phenomenal question because I do have to explain it quite often. So as a state representative, I had the distinct pleasure of representing portions of West Philadelphia. So it's, Overbrook, Haddington, Carroll Park, Winfield, Overbrook Farms, Morris Park, Green Hill. If I forgot a neighborhood, please charge it to my head and not my heart. So I represent sections of West Philadelphia, and I represent roughly around 60,000 people. And I represent them up in Harrisburg. And we essentially do three things. One, we provide constituent services. So that is, and I know it's not necessarily our jurisdiction to manage potholes and clean, drive alleys, but we have to be a jack of all trades in this moment and in this climate. So we do provide those services, but we also help with, your LAHEAP application. We help you navigate, finding, affordable housing. We also, additionally, we pass laws. So when you think of laws that are preempted by the state, it makes me think of three pieces. One, when it comes to increasing the minimum wage. So right now we are at $7.25. Every single state around us, even the red state of West Virginia, the red state of Ohio, have a higher minimum wage than we do. So locally, our city council cannot increase our minimum wage. That has to go through Harrisburg. So that is one piece of legislation or policy that runs through, our office. When you think of gun laws, we know one of the most popular guns used right now in a lot of criminal activities are ghost guns. So we want to, regulate them. We want to ban them from being sold, being purchased, being, made with 3D printers in, someone's
Right.
basement, which we know is something that is happening across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, not just in Philadelphia. So to pass stricter gun control laws or stricter gun laws, we need Harrisburg to do that. So that's another piece. One third issue is taxes. When you think of increasing your sales tax or the gas tax, or if you think of almost every tax, the cigarette tax, it is something that we pass in Harrisburg. So those are so I pass laws, that will impact the entire Commonwealth, policy that will impact the entire Commonwealth. The last piece that we are constitutionally required to do is pass a budget. So if you think of a budget, they always say it is a moral document of what society believes in. So as we'll talk talk through tonight. Some of the things that I'm really passionate about is affordability. So that is addressing making sure mass transit stays relatively cheap. That is investing in childcare, education, our aging school buildings, affordable housing, public safety. So we pass a budget on the state level. So if you think about it in comparison to Philadelphia, so Philadelphia's budget, I think Sherelle proposed around a $7 billion budget. Our budget with our governor, Josh Shapiro, he presented a budget that's roughly around 51, $52 billion. So it is our responsibility to pass a budget for the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And as the Philadelphia delegation chair, that means I represent 25 members from the city of Philadelphia, from West Philadelphia, South Philadelphia, Northeast, North Philadelphia. And my role as a delegation chair is to be the lead voice for the city of Philadelphia in the House of Representatives. So when it comes to all the competing resources or competing policy issues or the competing priorities, sometimes our issue in Philadelphia aren't the same issues in Lackawanna County. But it is my responsibility to ensure that I am prioritizing the issues that matter the most for the city of Philadelphia. So when you think of our challenges, when you think of us being the second poorest, biggest city in the entire country, it is my role to tell my Democratic caucus that no, $11 an hour for minimum wage is just not enough. You can't survive off of that in the city of Philadelphia. And this is a great example. So we just passed a bill out of the House of Representatives that will increase the minimum wage, but it'll increase it with a stair step. So the first year, starting next year, it will go to $11 an hour. Then it will go to 12 the following year. Then it'll eventually get to 15, and the COLA will be tied to it. But again, in the city of Philadelphia, you can't survive off of $11 an hour. We technically should be at around $20, $25. But so what the bill allows us to do is it allows city council to authorize legislation to increase the minimum wage up to $15 an hour immediately. And that is what my role is as the Philadelphia delegation chair, is to really advocate for the city to ensure again that we're meeting the challenges and taking care of them as much as we can in Harrisburg.
Wow.
Mhm.
That is a comprehensive explanation that if you didn't understand, you should now. And
Yeah.
it really also lays out the complexity of the
Hmm.
of the things that you are passionate about, but you're also advocating for. And I'm sure that that journey creates challenges. And so our show itself is called The Flip Side of Adversity. So I always
Hmm.
ask a leader to kind of think about a flip side moment that really helped you or shaped how you are leading.
Yeah.
Can you think of a flip side moment as a leader that has really shaped how you
Yeah.
have decided to lead?
Yeah, absolutely. Two actually come to mind, two examples and two issues that are near and dear to my heart. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Governor Shapiro talks about it all the time. We are a divided legislature. I think we're like the only one in the entire country. And that's where the House of Representatives, we are controlled by a Democratic caucus. And so always happy to say, so just so excited to always brag that we have the first Black female speaker in the House of Representatives with
That part.
Joanna McClinton,
Yes.
my neighbor here in
Yes.
West Philadelphia. I'm always just so excited to say that part because it's like we're a part of history, particularly during Women's Month. But I digress.
Yes.
So we have a divided legislature. So the House of Representatives is led by Democrats, but we only have a majority of one, which is a very slim majority. We are looking to pick up more seats, but it means we have to have conversations that are in alignment with some of our more conservative Democrats that tend to be out Western PA, where Donald Trump has won in some of their election cycles, 5 to 10 points. So we have to be mindful of that. But
Mm-hmm.
then we also have a Republican Senate that doesn't look at Philadelphia very favorably. And
Mm-hmm.
they tend not to want to invest. They tend to, not want to move the policies that most impact our city. They tend to forget that we are part of the economic region of the state. We represent a portion of the state that provides 41% of the revenue here for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we need investment in order to continue to thrive. So that's essentially what I walk into every day when I am up in Harrisburg. So two examples to your question, where it really you have to really define the type of leadership that you want in Harrisburg, because at the end of the day, you want to get things done for that young person that's still traveling an hour outside of their community to get an education. Or I think about my 5-year-old niece who goes to school and practices not just fire drills, but she's practicing
Right.
active shooter drills, which is
Mm.
why gun restrictions and gun control, responsible gun control, is really important. And we have to navigate. And how do we understand the issue in urban areas, but also how do we understand the issue in rural areas? And that is essentially the approach that you must take, because we don't control both chambers. And we still have some Democrats that come out of rural areas that honestly have different experiences when it comes to accessing guns. I mean, in their communities, they're used to hunting on Sunday, and
Right.
growing up and going to shooting practice. I mean, I think I shot a gun one time at a
Mhm.
driving range, and I would never do it again in my life.
Mhm. Mhm.
So essentially, we're growing up differently, but you have to understand. You almost have to walk a mile in that person's shoes,
Mhm.
and obviously, we're coming to the table with different lived experiences, but that's an opportunity to find common ground with some of the issues that you collectively care about. And I'll give you the two examples. One example goes back to mass transit and SEPTA. I had an opportunity to, as the chair, ride out to Senator Pittman, Joe Pittman, who is the Republican leader over on the Senate side. And he asked a simple question: why should the taxpayers in my backyard that don't ride your transit system, why should they be forced to foot the bill as a taxpayer to fund your system when they don't ride it? But I had to explain to him, well, this is the first time I've actually drove out to Westmoreland County, and I've been paying for your roads and bridges since I was 18, working that $5.15 job at the Philadelphia Zoo. So rather than creating an environment where it's us versus them, or rural versus suburban or urban, let's think about how we can take off the red and blue jerseys and really put on that one jersey, and that is the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. How can we support what you're interested in investing in? And at the time, I believe he was interested in expanding the footprint of data centers, which is a little controversial. But
Yeah.
if that's what you want for your community, how can I be supportive of you, but then how can you be supportive of what we need to continue to keep our economy going? I mean, it's not just about Philadelphia with mass transit. I mean, it impacts Bucks County, Montgomery, Chester, Delaware County. So it moves an entire economic region. And you might not care about the young person that needs the bus to get to school, or the senior that needs to get to their doctor's appointment, but can you care about the individual that's coming from King of Prussia that needs to get into the city of Philadelphia to get to the University of Penn Medical, hospital, in order to be that radiologist to
Right.
provide, cancer treatments. So, I mean, it's an entire ecosystem that is impacted by our mass transit system. So that's, one clear example of, the type of leader that we have to be in this moment. Because at the end of the day, we all can have our stances. We all can, stand in our own corners, but the individuals that we collectively serve, they won't survive or can't survive unless we come into a room to reach common ground. I think the second example, and I'll be shorter, is the issue around maternal health. When we talk about that Black women are 3 times more likely to die, and that our rates with maternal mortality mirror and rival some third world countries. I mean, here in Pennsylvania alone, we had over 100 deaths in 2021, where if you think about Canada, they had less than 20 or
Oh,
maybe less than 10. So that's the magnitude of the issue that we're dealing with here in the Commonwealth. And for some time, some of our colleagues, rural colleagues and colleagues in the Senate, were asking the question, why are you all focused on Black maternal health? Why
Mm-hmm.
not maternal health, period? And it's just like, well, whatever gets you to the table. Because when you talk about maternal health deserts, and that is when you don't have access to any type of obstetric care and don't have any access to any type of prenatal care, you're considered a maternal health desert. And the March of Dimes has identified about 6 or 7 counties that are considered, deserts. And you just had Crozier close in Delaware County. We had Hahnemann
Mm-hmm.
close. But when you look at what they deem and classify as maternal deserts, they're all in Republican rural areas. And in
Wow.
some instances, my colleague, who I forget which county she's from, but it's in Western PA. She literally had to travel. She had to drive her daughter 45 minutes outside of Pennsylvania into Ohio in order to access care. And my Republican colleagues begin to realize, oh, this is an issue in my backyard. And it isn't just about birthing partners being able to give birth in the zip code that they live in. It's about, do families want to locate in your district if they don't have access to, quality health care? Do, businesses want to come? Do they want to build an economy around, your district if you just don't have access to, vital services like that? So that has actually brought in so many Republicans, together on this issue because they recognize that they too have this challenge in their own backyard. So again, we're not going to agree on everything. Listen, if you put an anti-abortion bill in front of my desk, I vote it down every time. And
Mm-hmm.
but the issues that you can align around, you take those up and get them across the finish line as much as possible because the focus should be ultimately on the lives and Pennsylvanians in our state. So
It's such a powerful reflection in strategies for leaders. So we have all types of leaders who listen into the show.
mm,
And you just shared kind of a universal practice of when you're a leader and you're in rooms in which everyone may not see it the same way, create a conversation where the vantage point or the perspective that you're
yeah,
seeing it can shift so that we don't stay at odds, because then people in general lose out.
yeah,
But beginning to really think about, like, how can we look at it in different ways,
yeah.
so that everyone's lived experience improves. and
Mm,
and you brought up Black Maternal Health, and we are getting ready to go into Black Maternal Health Week, April 11th through the 17th. And
mhm.
this year's theme is rooted in joy and justice. And I'm curious, as such an advocate for this work, what are some of the areas of progress that
Mm.
you have begun to see?
Yeah, so it is a really exciting time for this space. I mean, we have been doing a lot of work to essentially put Pennsylvania in a position where we can be a destination for families to, find that joy and justice when it comes to, their birthing journey. The idea is obviously to have access to, quality, affordable, accessible, competent, culturally competent care in the individual's backyard. Since we've been working on this movement, we've been seeing significant progress. For the first time, which is it's an exciting year. Our Governor Josh Shapiro, has literally just produced the very first maternal health strategic plan for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I mean, just imagine how long this issue has been. Before us, that we're now just creating a plan for tackling this issue. But it's extremely exciting, the fact that we have this first plan that has encompassed so many different stakeholders. So not I mean legislators, families, department heads, organizations, grassroots organizations that are on the ground, like doulas and midwives, and doctors themselves, as well as we have a maternal mortality review committee, which was first established established in, I want to say it was 2018. So it is still relatively new, but it is progress nonetheless. And the strategic plan focuses on five core areas. One is to create, more access points for families on the ground, more health equity on the ground, and making sure that families have access in every single zip code to some type of maternal care. The second is we are addressing the behavioral health challenges in this space. One of the leading causes of maternal mortality deaths here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is mental health and substance use disorder. So they will be, addressing that issue. The other is expanding the maternal health workforce. We want to, make sure we're bringing more and more people into this space, but also making sure that they are culturally competent. We also want to ensure that we are addressing those healthcare deserts, particularly in the rural areas. So those are some of the key touch points within the maternal health strategic plan. So we are really excited that the governor literally just rolled it out this week. So we're very excited about that.
News hot off the presses.
Yeah, hot off the press, hot off the press. And, they have a 1 year benchmark that, they are going to measure themselves. I'm a firm believer if it's not measured, it's not managed. And we have to ensure that we see our rates going down. That is critically important in this work. Some of the other big wins is we've introduced two versions of the Momnibus package. So if you think about on the federal level, there's a Momnibus package that has been spearheaded by Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, Senator Booker has it over on the Senate side, and it's a package of bills that try to tackle a series of angles when it comes to the issue of maternal health. So we've introduced our own version. We are on Momnibus 2.0. But we've also been able to get several bills, not just out of the House, but some bills to the governor's desk. So 3 bills that we've gotten signed. Supported by both Democrats and Republicans, so it has been a bipartisan effort. So the first bill was to ensure that we're not only tracking maternal mortality, but we're also tracking maternal morbidity, which is a higher rate than mortality. So mortality is when you pass away, unfortunately, due to a pregnancy-related cause, but morbidity is when something goes wrong and there is an issue that you have to live with, past, your delivery. And sometimes that, can cost you your job, that could put you on a different economic status. So we have to track that as well. And it went from tracking every 3 years and producing a report every 3 years to every year it's required. So we were able to do that. 2 others, we were able to extend Medicaid to cover doula care because we know research says when doulas are part of the birthing process, it brings down the rate of maternal mortality and morbidity. And last but not least is postpartum. Postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. We have to begin normalizing this conversation so we can begin to understand how do we tackle it, how do we provide the resources for it, and how do we put more people into the pipeline to ensure that that foundation and that option is there. So we've been able to do that with a series of bills. Again, we got a slew of them out of the House of Representatives, still sitting on the Senate's desk. But at the very least, we got the 3 bills passed. Two other things I'd love to just mention really quickly. We also extended Medicaid up to a year postpartum. It used to be for 6 weeks, you would get kicked off of your health care and then have to, I don't even know how to manage the health exchange.
Right.
Yes, so we extended that up to a year postpartum, and not every governor did that. I want to say we are one of 38 states, so elections do have consequences. And I think the great thing about Governor Wolf at the time was that we did not have to do another study. We didn't have to have a round table. We didn't have to have a think tank. We didn't need to do a pilot. He just extended it, which was great. And as a result, we've been able to cover over 20,000 families with healthcare. And last but not least is the funding part. And the reason why I bring up these 3 issues, because remember, goes back to your first question or your second question as to what does the role entail. So remember, passing legislation, shifting policy. providing investments on the ground and ensuring that we are, dealing with constituent services. So we've made significant investments. We did a $25 million allocation to maternal health, where we funded the new Temple Women and Families Health Center that is in the lower Northeast. We were able to create an innovation fund that funded a program, did funded a series of programs, but one of the programs I'm most excited about is the Philly Joy Bank, which is a universal basic income program for pregnant families. It's $1,000 a month for 250 families for 18 months. So we were able to fund an innovative project like that. We also were able to fund doula care in our correctional facilities. So each
Wow.
both Muncie and Cambridge have access to that service. So we've made significant progress, and we're actually seeing our numbers tinker down a little bit here in the city of Philadelphia. But that gives me an opportunity to plug Black Maternal Health Week here in Pennsylvania. We will be there's a series of organizations hosting just so many great programs, related to this issue. But in Harrisburg, we'll be doing a 2-day session of policy conversations. We'll do a press conference. We'll talk about, the progress that we've made, but also the work that is still ahead. We'll also feature, which is very exciting, the Ebony Canal. I don't know if you've seen the documentary,
I have
but it's
not.
you
Tell us
have to
about it.
see it. Yeah, so it's a documentary, the first documentary ever to focus and tell the stories of essentially Black maternal mortality. It talks about, it follows the birthing journey of about 3 to 4 different individuals, and it shows you the good, bad, and the ugly of what is happening, behind the scenes when it comes to this issue. But it also talks about, the progress and the attention that it's getting. It's also narrated by Viola Davis. It received 2 Emmys, which is amazing for the
Wow.
documentary. So we will be screening the project while we're up there on the 13th and the 14th. And again, we'll talk about, the work that we have, moving ahead. I think this year our conversation is focusing on how do we hold hospitals and providers accountable for what is happening in this space. So a lot of progress, still a lot more to go, but, super excited about Black Maternal Health Weekend for, you all to join us.
Yes, and I want to honor some of those numbers. So you referenced a couple of times within explaining the amazing progress that has been made. You did share with us the number of 100 deaths. Can
Mm-hmm.
you also share a little bit more of the numbers that you're hoping to see come down, so
Mm,
that those who are listening, and
yeah.
this may be their first time even hearing
Yeah.
about Black Maternal Health Week
Mm-hmm.
and this push, can you give them even more context of what the numbers are that we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to deeply impact?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the idea is to decrease it completely. And any one single death in one of the most wealthiest countries in the world. I mean, if we have enough money to bomb other countries,
That
we have
part.
enough money to fix this issue. There should be no one that loses their life when it comes to pregnancy. I mean, literally, even though we have the startling numbers that we have, it is also reported that 95% of the deaths are preventable. And the fundamental question with every single thing that we do is why aren't we preventing them, and how do we prevent them? And the why aren't we preventing them is studying the data from us establishing the Maternal Mortality Review Committee. It's us listening to doulas, listening to midwives about what is happening. And, that's where a lot of our legislation comes from. It's understanding that 51% of the deaths are happening during the postpartum period. But, prior to the postpartum period, there are deaths that happen, during delivery and during the prenatal period. And you're actually seeing those numbers going down. So when I say our numbers in Philadelphia are going down, they're going down in that space. That's because hospitals are more responsive. performative. They are expanding their teams to include midwives, to include doulas. They're doing, better oversight during the prenatal period and making sure that they're watching vitals. But when they see that, because some of the other leading causes is substance use disorder, hypertension, preeclampsia, cardiovascular disease. When they see, a high risk pregnancy, they are being a lot more intentional about the care that they're going to get, during the pregnancy and actually while they're, delivering. And they are aware that they have these challenges. So they're making sure that they're being intentional in during the postpartum period. Now, I'll lift up this one hospital, the University of Penn Medicine, actually created a program called Heart Safe Motherhood. And what it does, it gives every patient that has given birth, every family that has given birth, it gives them a blood pressure monitor where the hospital can actually check their vitals in real time. And if they see something that is off, they have the ability to treat it, make recommendations, bring them back in. And as a direct result of that technology, you've actually seen their readmission rates go down. You've seen their maternal mortality and morbidity rates go down. So as a direct result of that, they actually expanded the technology across the 5 different birthing hospitals here in the city of Philadelphia, and it even expanded to Lincoln. We were able to secure them a grant to run their own pilot program. But the idea is that we have to ensure that insurance companies are paying for it. So now we passed 2 bills out of the House that requires Medicaid to cover it, requires private insurance. Obviously, we got to get it through the Senate. But that's how we, navigate this space from an investment perspective, policy, and then shifting it with legislation. So again, pie in the sky is that we have no deaths and that Pennsylvania becomes a destination where, people are able to, get pregnant, prepare for pregnancy, deliver, and go through a postpartum period where they can actually thrive and actually have access to the resources that they need to have the birthing journey that, they envision and that they desire. So that is, obviously how we're putting together and working to bring our rates down is looking at what are the leading causes, but then also using policy and investment to, go after those issues and challenging them. So we are seeing a decrease in Philadelphia, and it's, because we started being more intentional about the hypertension, the cardiovascular disease, being intentional about, if somebody is a high risk pregnancy, how do we ensure that they have the services, the wraparound services, the pieces that they need in order to, survive the pregnancy and get out safely. So
Yeah.
here's to us getting those numbers to zero.
Absolutely. And I think that as I'm listening to you, it also creates an opportunity for mothers to advocate for themselves
Absolutely.
as this information becomes consistently shared.
Yeah.
Then they don't minimize when they think something isn't right. They're
Yes.
empowered with
Hmm.
actually saying, no, I need you to check for, and
Yeah.
standing in
Mhm.
their truth and advocating for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you think of Serena Williams when
Right.
she did the documentary, and her doctors weren't listening to her. And listen, I don't know about you, she's in better health than I will ever be, and
Right?
can afford, the best in medical care. And just even she was not listened to. So it's important not only to be your own advocate and to, know your body through and through, but it's
Hmm.
also important to build that support system around you. And, it might not be your partner. It might be your doula. It might be your midwife, which is why I was adamant about Medicaid covering doula care, because you should be able to have access to every support system, every piece that you think you need to, bring life into this world, and also to, be in a postpartum period that, you have the resources that you need access to. I mean,
Yeah.
pie in the sky, you get a doula, a midwife, a lactation specialist, a doula during postpartum. You got everything. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, and I think it's important to get that information out there. I mean, because when my younger sister was pregnant with my niece Harper at 5, she was pregnant during COVID. And if you remember, hospitals weren't allowing more
Hmm.
than one person into the hospital room. I mean, she took her husband,
Hmm.
power to, the men that are, trusted messengers, they are enlightened men. but we were devastated that he was the only one that could go in there. And like she's getting coached, and I had to, I convinced her to get a doula, and she's getting coached by her doula that, giving birth is, a
Mhm.
natural, and your body feels natural doing it, and just told her to be weary of them wanting to push you to have a
Mm.
c-section, without even really notifying her or talking to her much. They tried to push her to have a c-section, and she really had to advocate for herself, but she was able to advocate because she had the training from the doula, who was extremely helpful. So I think just getting the word out as much as possible, just all of the things that are available to every single individual that is, interested in getting pregnant and giving birth, and making sure that it's affordable, it's accessible,
Mhm.
insurance is covering it, so they can come out in a healthy way.
I think about all of, as you shared, and you literally went from the hospital to insurance to choice. All of those things are so interconnected. And I
Mhm.
know that many of the issues that you address are deeply rooted in systemic inequities. And
Yes.
I'm curious, as a leader, how do you approach creating change within systems that actually weren't necessarily built for everyone?
That is a great question. I mean, even when I think of the issue of maternal health, it's 80% of your health outcomes are based on the social determinants of health. So
Mhm.
that is everything that is going on outside of the hospital room. And you think about not only our healthcare system having systemic racism
Mhm.
tied to how Black women are treated, you think of how society and communities were built that also has an impact on our health outcomes. And to your point, we have to recognize those inequities, understand the history of those inequities, and also work from a policy and a legislative and an investment strategy to reverse those inequities. And there's several things that you can think of. I mean, when you think of, the education conversation that's happening in the city of Philadelphia, when we're thinking of, the closure of 20 school buildings and how that creates an inequity issue. If you think about me, traveling an hour outside of my community, that is, not just the travel time, but it's also being able to afford mass transit. It's my mother being able to not being able to afford childcare. It is all of these, inequities that are created in our community that we are working, hand over fist to try to, address. I mean, so when we're talking about, the affordability crisis, it's also rooted in inequities. So that's why when it comes to the policies that we're pushing, we have to talk about bold ideas. Like we have to talk about universal childcare. We know that the average childcare cost is about $27,000 a year, which is, sometimes it's just unaffordable. It's just
Yeah.
unaffordable. It's unattainable. But, when you don't have access to quality and affordable childcare, you impact individuals to make economic
Right.
decisions. And you're ultimately impacting their, decisions when it comes to who goes to work, who doesn't go to work. When
Mhm.
you think about during COVID-19, and there were over, close to 1 million women leaving the workforce because of the lack of childcare access and dependent care that they had to take care of. So those inequities, have an impact to that very issue. Or if you think of transportation, when you have a state that doesn't believe in the transit systems that exist in urban communities, you're essentially shutting down, access to economic opportunity, access to educational opportunities, access to healthcare when you shut down mass transit, which is why, the federal government needs to think about, funding more mass transit. You have the majority of the country that is moving into urban and suburban areas where, communities rely on
Mhm.
transportation. So we have to start, thinking how, because we can't, nickel and dime our way out of this from the city and state level. We need, significant federal investment. Or when you think about, environmental justice issues, we're talking about the data centers and this big conversation about AI. But when you look at the building of data centers and the negative environmental impact that it has on communities, it goes back to the systemic racism and the structure of our communities. And people thinking that it's okay to put a data center in an urban backyard because
Mhm.
it'll create jobs, it'll create great union jobs, it'll also create jobs on site. And when you look at it from that lens, you have to ensure that we're also having a conversation about the environmental impact and how it impacts water, how it impacts cooling, how it impacts energy costs and
Energy.
energy
Mhm.
bills, utility bills. I think it's an opportunity just in this environment, because again, as difficult as it is a difficult moment in this country. But it also gives us an opportunity to structure and advocate in society based on what we want to see. So when we're
Right.
talking about affordability, we want to talk about universal childcare. We want to talk about free mass transit. We want to talk about affordable housing. We want to talk about decreasing our energy costs. We want to talk about this war in Iran costing us $1 billion each day and increasing our costs at the gas pump. But recognizing that we have to find common ground, when you go to the Republicans, you have to articulate to them that, so the farmers can't access a certain type of fertilizer that comes from that region, so it's impacting them economically. Or when
Right.
we're talking about increasing the minimum wage from 7.25, which nobody can live on, to an actual livable wage, which is now $20 to $25 an hour. So I mean, when I think of the original question, it makes me think of that is how people are impacted when you have these inequities. It triples and quadruples on series of different issues, which is why some of the policies that I've taken up have been driven so much towards affordability.
Yeah. And when we have listeners who are tuning in to gain insight from you, what message do you want listeners to actually take away about how government is working for them? You have laid out many of the
Mhm.
policies. You have helped us understand how they are interconnected. You have unpacked
Mhm.
how systemically inequity shows up and creates a cost on the lives of real people. If I'm the average listener,
Mhm.
what message do you want me to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, I think the message I would give to the everyday person is, whatever capacity that you have, in whatever capacity that you have, is show up and articulate your individual challenges in your community that you care most about. Whether that be the education system and not wanting your child to enter in a school building with lead and asbestos, or your child again traveling that hour outside of their neighborhood in order to access a quality education. Show up for that issue. Or if you're important to you environmental justice and want to ensure that you aren't breed or you're not a part of a community that is dealing with increased asthma, or you don't have access to a quality green space where you can just sit down, have a cup of coffee, or if you don't have the commercial corridor that you want to see in your neighborhood, you don't have access to the business corridor that you want to see. Show up and advocate for that issue. Or we all know affordable housing is a big issue in the city of
Mhm.
Philadelphia, particularly when the average rent is between $1,200 to $1,500. If you want more affordable housing opportunities in your community, you got to show up and talk about it. And, whether that be at a march where you have the time, you have the capacity, you have, the ability to even get there or spend the hours that it takes, show up to that march. But if you want to just show up through an email, send that email. Or if you want to show up on social media, regardless of how you show up, you just got to show up in this moment. Because again, with all of the competing interests that are happening, with all the information in the news that's flooding all of our news cycles, it really, you really want to just stick your head in the sand and not respond. But every day that you get up and go to that gas pump, every day you get up and go to buy those groceries, every time you send your kid to school, every time you try to access a doctor's appointment and you realize you don't have a hospital, it's because you got to show up and really advocate for the issues that are near and dear to your heart, but also the issues that impact you, and show up in a way that is most in alignment with your voice, and show up in a way that is most convenient for you. Because at the end of the day, government should be working for every single individual in every single zip code. You should be able to have access to a quality of life that you're able to thrive, and you're able to have access. You don't have food insecurity. You don't have, you're not breathing in air where you're going to be getting asthma. You don't have lead and asbestos in the spaces that you occupy. You have access to a job opportunity, access to education, all of the things. And the only way that we're going to get there is if we fight for the community that we really believe in, that we can sit in.
And we started this conversation by taking it back to the beginning for you.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, as we close out, there are many of the people who follow my platform are women leaders.
Mm,
And what advice would you give to an emerging leader,
mm,
especially women, as
mhm.
well as women of color, who
Right.
feel that they're actually called to
Mm,
public service, but they're unsure of how to get started, whether to
mhm.
get started? Could you close us out with speaking to those emerging leaders who are, God, I feel like I should, but I
Yeah.
don't know how?
Yeah, no, listen, this is the time, in difficult times and difficult moments like this, it truly believes, it breeds the leaders that we need in this moment. People that are frustrated with the system, are ready to get off the sidelines. And, my advice would be to do a couple of things. One, find a mentor in the space that you want to occupy, and grab a cup of coffee, have some type of meetup just to express your interest and to pick their brain on how they got to where they are. How did they decide to even go on that path, and what are the steps that you took in order to occupy the space that you're occupying? So I would say, number one, look for a mentor that looks like you. It is one thing to have a mentor that is a male, but you need to understand what it is like to be a woman in this space, a cisgendered identifying woman in this space. So that's important, that you see yourself in the person that is mentoring you. I would say second is identify as many trainings as possible. When I was younger, I took the Emily's List training several times. I just finished. You're never too old to learn something new or to better hone your craft. I just did a training by an organization called Emerge, and they have a program that focuses on Black women that are interested in running for higher office. And I did it 2 years prior to me making a decision to run for the United States Congress for the third congressional district. And that training was phenomenal. I haven't been in office for 10 years. I still needed the training, and I learned so many great new things. But I also built an amazing network, and that is one of the other pieces that I would stress, is to create a network that is beyond your immediate circle, beyond your work circle. If you're part of any of the organizations that are popular, that are historic, that are prominent, I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I'm also a member of the Links Incorporated, and they have been two networks that have been amazing to build. So I would absolutely say, build that network. I think last but not least, self care. Make sure you are doing self care, because if you are not pouring into yourself, you cannot pour into others. You cannot pour into the community. You cannot pour into your other passions that you are really interested in. So I would say make sure that you identify what that self care looks like. For me, it is constant prayer and constant foundation in my faith. It is my family who has helped just be a rock for me throughout my entire career, and also they give me tough love when I need it. But then also, either working out, meditation, early prayer. I mean, find what your self care package looks like, and make sure you invest in it. Because again, if you're not pouring in yourself, you can't pour into others or into the passions that you're interested in.
I am so excited that you closed on that
Yeah.
point. I was curious. I said, she is doing a lot. And I am wondering, how is she staying grounded? And
Woo.
you covered it with balance. And you also, in your previous answer, gave
Mhm.
others the permission to
Mm.
find their boundaries.
Yeah,
Don't be
you need
driven by everybody else's expectations. Identify
mhm.
what you want to advocate for and show up in how it will work for you. Well, we are at the close of our time, and as we close out, I'm just curious, what's next for you? What's on the horizon?
Well, getting into that self care. But for me, politically, I'm still in a race for the 192nd legislative district, so I will be, God willing, if He will have me, if my constituents will have me for the 192nd, I will be going into my sixth term. So that is something I am currently focused on, and going back up to Harrisburg. I mean, the work is not finished. My work is not done. I mean, obviously, we still are fighting when it comes to the maternal health issue, but also as the Philadelphia delegation chair, I still want to land that sustainable funding stream for mass transit. We have some priorities coming from, our mayor that she wants to see us move up in Harrisburg. So I really want to be a part of that dynamic team that is coming from the city of Philadelphia to really, move the pieces that we need to move in order to tackle Philadelphia's challenges. When I think of this upcoming election cycle, we got to win the midterms. So we not only have to get over the hump with this primary and make sure that we elect a dynamic third congressional candidate here in Pennsylvania. So I'll be helping to focus on that, but also helping to flip as many seats in Congress as possible to ensure that we take back the majority and make sure that we expand our majority in Harrisburg. I hear we're also in the shot of a majority in the Senate. So just imagine if we had a trifecta here in Pennsylvania. I can tell you, we minimum wage won't be 7.25, and we will find that sustainable funding stream for mass transit if we had
Yes.
a trifecta. So yeah, it's just really being a part of Philadelphia, showing up this election cycle, and using this as an opportunity to talk about the issues that are top of mind for us, which we know is affordability. And we also know that it's about wage stagnation. We got to get wages up. And last but not least, it has to be about holding people accountable in this moment, particularly Republicans, and making sure that we maintain the freedoms and the democracy that we are currently losing in this moment. So I mean, we have a lot ahead of us, but I'm super excited, and I just want to thank you for having me be a part of your show. I think this is my second or third appearance, and really talking about leadership. I mean, leadership is definitely needed in this moment. It is hard to lead in a difficult climate like the one that we're in, but that's when it creates the best leaders for calmer seas. So, and always remember, the people that came before us had it a little bit harder than we do. So we just, our generation just has to do our part right now, and I'm excited, but going to make sure I focus on that self care though.
So here we are. As we close today's conversation, I want to bring us back to one simple, powerful truth. Leadership is not just about what you say, it's about what you stay committed to. Because passion will get you started, but purpose is what sustains you when the work gets hard. And what we actually heard today is a reminder that real leadership shows up consistently. in the decisions that we make, the people that we serve, and the problems we actually refuse to ignore. So the question I want to leave you with, the action I want to challenge you with, is what are you committed to actually carrying? Not when it's easy, but when it's necessary. Because every one of us has influence, whether in our homes or in our workplaces or actually out in the community. And when we align that influence with passion and purpose, we don't just talk about change, we become a part of it. So that's the work. And that's this week's leadership accountability moment, because that's what's going to be required of you. So go after it. And we'll be here, same place, same time next week on the flip side.